Welcome to the Serious TV Drama Podcast. I'm Scott, and joining me once again this week, the Zendaya to my tarantula, it's Jamie.
Hey there, Scott. Just a reminder to you and our audience, tonight's safe word is ew.
Yeah, there's a bit of that to go around tonight. And tonight we will be talking about, one hell of an episode of Evil. But before we go there, we are going to start, as we often do, with an episode that might have been one of the more cringe-inducing and disturbing and, or should I say, ew-inducing episodes.
Yeah.
Without, and mind you, without the typical super splattering carnage that the show isn't usually noted for. And that means
there was splattering.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Well, yes, we're talking about the latest episode of The Boys' Dirty Business, and a dirty business it was. Now, this was an episode that I personally had both a great deal of appreciation for and maybe more than a smidge of consternation for as well. But why, Scott? Why? Why be consternated? Well, maybe I was a little bit more annoyed at myself, but not exactly for the reason some of you might be suspecting. This time I wasn't disappointed in myself for not picking up on something. I was disappointed in not being willing to freewheel theorize like so many of my co-hosts have done over the years on this podcast. Some of those folks I've even mocked at the time for their silly theories. But to illustrate, because Jamie already knows what I'm talking about, let me read a message I sent to Jamie. This was only a few hours after we finished recording last week. It was 4:48 a.m., which shows what kind of psychopath I actually am. And my message was, ellipse. Maybe Kessler isn't real. Maybe he's like Becca, devil on the shoulder as opposed to her angel. Maybe a manifestation of drug V, or a real person who died, guilt eating at Butcher who's now created him. We've not seen him truly interact with anyone but Butcher, even if you watch the brief scene with Samir. Just a possibility. And then the emoji that's like, So, yeah, no guts, no glory, no credit. And look, I know thousands, hundreds of thousands of other folks have picked up on this Kessler being like an evil gremlin in Butcher's head probably weeks ago. I don't tend to read articles and things about the show while I podcast about it because I don't want what I say to be me cribbing from someone else. Although we would probably have a better informed podcast, quite frankly, if I did do that. I now realize that. And I don't do that with other shows, but I try to, whatever my lead show is I'm covering, I try to be kind of, make it just me and me alone, as far as my views on it. But whatever. I'm actually just annoyed that the reveal happened this week because I was all planning to kick things off with the theory, but whatever. I should have called it after we watched the first 3 episodes of the season. So boo on me. But putting me aside, which should be easy to do here. So about this perhaps not so big reveal about Kessler being in Butcher's tumor ravaged head. Jamie.
Yes. Yeah. Listen, you sent me that message and I was kind of like, why didn't I even think of that? And you know why I didn't think of that? Because I honestly didn't think the boys were going to go full Tyler Durden on it.
Right.
Like we've done this a million times. I don't know. I just didn't think that was going to be the thing. But then the episode starts up when we first get Kessler in the episode and I recognize like, oh shit, he's wearing the exact same thing he's always wearing. Mm-hmm. He is absolutely not real. And then of course, by the end of the episode, we get the reveal, but, I'll give kudos to you because you did throw it out there. So,
throw it out there to you.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I think
in my world, I'm all that matters. So.
I do think this is something that a lot of people picked up on. So it's not as mind blowing a revelation as some things that we've seen over the years.
Yeah.
This wasn't exactly the Sixth Sense. you
No,
know?
no, no. Absolutely not. But I do like what that, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of a trope there, but I do like what it lent when we got to Kessler being like, of course I'm not fucking real. Like, and then give us that backstory.
Well, the thing, first of all, as you watch the episode before we get to the revelation, um, and if you're already suspecting it, you start to become really aware of it. You notice that
Yeah,
even though it appears that he's saying things to Samir, you never get the feeling at any moment that Samir is reacting to him
right.
at all. But the thing I will give them props or credit for, regardless of whether this was something that was obvious to many or not, doesn't matter, because we certainly didn't bring it up until it was already revealed. So we get, we're a bunch of dummies. I liked the way they came up with to give us the reveal when Kessler reacts to Becca.
Yeah,
I thought that was when they did it that way. I was like, I hadn't thought of that being how the reveal would happen. And that's the best way to do the reveal. And that's the more unique thing about this rather than say a Tyler Durden from, Fight Club thing or any other kind of variations on this that have been over the years is the fact that you've got the two. And it really does come off like an angel and devil on one show. It's so beautifully cartoonish. I can imagine if this was drawn in a panel,
yep,
and maybe it has been. I don't know that for a fact. It probably hasn't been. That you can actually see him just literally like on his shoulders, maybe a little halo above Becca's head, and a little pitchfork and horns on Kessler. And then
yeah.
you get the backstory and which is essentially what you figured it was going to be, that
Hmm.
he's someone who's dead, and that probably and it's probably Butcher bears some, if not, or all responsibility for it based on what they used to do and the horrible things they did, blah, 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 blah.
I do also really like with the way that they revealed it, that showed us that like Butcher's fully aware that Becca is a manifestation, that she's not real.
Right.
Like he knows she's not. Even though he's talking to her and having these full blown conversations, that part of his brain is aware of the fact that she's not really there. But his brain isn't aware of the fact that Kessler isn't actually there. I thought that was a really interesting dynamic where he was surprised in the reveal.
Yeah, what I enjoyed about that is I almost can imagine, and again, it's almost taking it to a cartoonish length because as we've been told that his brain is being ravaged by this tumorous growth or the organism or whatever the heck it might be. I like to imagine that the part of his brain that isn't all fucked up is the part that's able to compartmentalize and understand that Becca isn't real, but the part where but the part where Kessler was coming out of, it's kind of like separating the ids and the super ids and the egos. Also, the
Yeah.
part where Kessler's coming out of is the part that's, has gone dark, and he wasn't able to see or realize that, hey, Kessler's just as fake, Although this opens the door, like, hey, let's get like 10 other more people from his past, let's line them all. Let's bring back everyone he's killed on the show for heaven's sake.
Yeah, I do. And I'd like he talks about that tumor that's in you, like that is me, and you're gonna do what I'm telling you to do. Um, so we get to see it not only as you have this conscious here that he's debating against, but now like we fully admitted that this thing now has control over you. It's making you do these things.
Right. So the question that, I mean, there's a bunch of questions that come out of all this. I mean, mostly about how Butcher proceeds from this point on, and the whole issue around the super virus or the super virus or whatever we call it. Because the big piece of information is there, even if Samir is able to create this, and we're going to go on the plot idea that he is able to do it, but the idea is that to make a batch that's so powerful that
Hmm.
could kill Homelander, such a volatile mix would be impossible to keep from going airborne, and would thus kill every single soup on the planet, which of course includes Annie, Kamiko, and Ryan. So the questions I have going forward, and we've got was this the sixth episode? Sixth episode, right? So we've got two more. And I already think I know the answers to one of them right off the bat. Now that we know that Kessler has been revealed to be the devil, Becca's angel, do we continue to see them for the next two episodes?
Yeah.
Okay. Will there be any additional arguing between those two?
I sure hope so.
I kind of hope that. I really kind of like that. Although, I mean, I know they did leave it at the end with the expression on Butcher's face. It looked like it was going to be Kessler certainly had the upper hand, you know. So it also makes me curious is, so I think Kessler says at one point he takes credit for being the one to kill Ezekiel. Or
Yeah.
i.e., when Butcher passes out, Kessler kind of, the Kessler side kind of took over, so to speak,
Yep.
and killed him. So are you telling me that Butcher ripped apart Ezekiel like that, but with just basically his fucking bare hands and whatever? He didn't. Are you telling me there's no tentacle thing going on in him or not? I mean, which is okay. I don't need to see tentacles come out of yet another person, but I was a little surprised by that. But maybe he just maybe it's just almost the V impact, and he just had,
Right.
he just went fucking berserker on that character. I don't think we'll ever see it because we don't need to, but I think we will. I'm sure there will be at some point in these last two episodes where we will see Butcher in action, but with the Kessler side, and we can
I
see
feel
what
like
he's
whatever
capable of
happened
doing.
was a bit of a like it almost like blew up. The sound effect that we got during that blackout, it's like it almost like caused it to blow up, like
Oh,
Victoria and
okay.
blowing up the heads.
Right, right.
I'm wondering if it's not something similar to that,
Hmm.
just based off of the sound effect we were given.
All right, that certainly makes a lot of sense. Wasn't Am I crazy? Wasn't there something with a character blowing up or something at the end of season three? Just was it an actual bomb? Was that an actual or a situation with a person that was having that happen?
Too much has happened in my brain since then.
Yeah,
I
I
cannot
thought
recall.
because I thought the situation was it was the whole fight with Soldier Boy and when Queen Maeve was involved, and they actually thought everyone assumed that she died in the big explosion, but actually she didn't. She just doesn't. She's just a civilian now.
Right.
Um, yeah, bad memories. My fault. Okay, so
Listen, and they put 2 years between seasons.
yeah,
This is going to happen.
I know, and I could have rewatched. I didn't.
Yeah, me neither. We don't have time for that.
Yeah, really. Please, come on. We're busy. Well, one of it. Well, never mind. Anyway.
We like to pretend like we are very busy people,
Yes,
and we don't have time for rewatches.
I've got all this sleep to get, and the dreams keep getting weirder lately, and it has nothing to do with the boys, though it's not helping.
There's no way you can have normal dreams after this week's episode. It's just it
No.
was too much.
And speaking of which, why don't we head down to Tech Knight's stately manor, where we have this right-wing billionaire fundraiser, and I have to say, I think I had made a reference in the past about Black Noir being sort of kind of the Batman on the Seven in the way, and if anyone had watched like the animated thing, Diabolical, which kind of fills in the Homelander Black Noir relationship, and so that also kind of fed into the Superman / Batman kind of idea. Although one also might say he's kind of a cross between Batman, maybe a little Black Panther, maybe, since whatever, I don't know. But it's clear that Tech Knight is definitely supposed to be specifically the boys universe, truly twisted version of Batman. from the stately manner, from the Alfred-like butler, from the former sidekick who is not just chained up in the basement like a gimp, but I'd also noticed that he's wearing bright red, and I was like going, that's an interesting color to pick. Reminiscent of a certain other sidekick. This one certainly cinched all that, especially after we had gotten all the gags at the VaughtCom exposition in the previous episode, which were kind of playing on the Batman movie. This one just takes it to another extreme. And when we're talking about extremes in this episode, there's only really one thing we're probably talking about. And I don't know how much conversation we're going to devote to it, but we'll see. We'll see. You know, you, we're clearly we're talking about what happens to poor, poor, poor Huey in the tech
Yeah,
cave.
it is a trauma-based episode laced with German chocolate cake.
Right. I mean, he should be glad that at least he was able to keep a mask on during almost all of it. So at least there was, at least you have that going on.
Yeah.
Um, the, look, I see no, I don't have a reason or desire to really to go through the, play by play or blow by blow as far as, and Ashley being involved. So we get into the BDSM stuff again and everything from tickling to urinating to words I didn't think I would hear come out of characters' mouths on this show, though I guess I shouldn't be shocked by such phrasings. But one of them I was like, whoa, 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 this
Yep.
is,
Yep.
she, did she just say what I,
She said
wow,
it.
that's, wow,
She sure did.
I wanted to, it's too bad I don't read about the show, like, during the course of the week. I'd love to see if there's an interview with the actress and said, so when you got that script, how'd you feel about those lines? This one line in specifically, how'd you feel
Yeah.
about that one? I'm sure she actually thought it was a hoot. Um, something that occurred to me afterwards was, I Tech Knight is supposed to be analogous to Batman in this universe. Even his interactions with Homelander earlier in the episode, where he talks about, combining them into a movie and all this stuff, and acting like, which is kind of like the Superman Batman kind of thing, where their two characters have always been inextricably linked. You had the stupid Snyder movie, which had the two of them in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Although, unlike Superman and Batman, Homelander doesn't consider Tech Knight remotely an equal in any way, shape, or form. But if going into the Batman thing into a much darker area, there have been, if you go back to the 1950s, when you had the whole situation, which pretty much almost removed almost all comic books from the stands because of congressional hearings, because they were talking about how it was, warping the nation's youth, whatever. The big thing they kept hitting on, and this is then became joked about for decades after, was Batman and Robin and at the very least, the homoerotic relationship between them, and so on and so forth. And when you play into issues of, pedophilia, perversity,
Right.
all sorts of things along those lines. So the fact that they used the Tech Knight character in this way, into such an extreme way, I thought was also kind of more than a wink and a nod to the past with Batman being one of the characters that was most said about, to the point that it was used in hearings. It was all about that, and how every Wonder Woman story seemed to be involving bondage and being tied down by dudes. Um, that's just the way it was. And yet those were the only comics that survived it. Everyone else went bye-bye, but the ones that they used most as the example of corrupting our nation's youth, but they were the ones that still kept being published, and everything else went away. Made no fucking sense. But
That's America, baby.
there you go. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like too that we get to see that the reason why he is kind of being used or pulled into this with the politicians and the Seven is because of his old money, like real money, not entertainment money, but because of the old money and the idea that that he came from slave catchers and now is running the prison system essentially, and this money is being filtered through, and now Homelander wants to use those prisons going forward. That is like a yellow brick road again, where they are able to weave really sad realities that exist in the real world, and pull them through in a way that we can look at it and kind of mock like how ridiculous it is. But essentially, that's the prison system in the U.S. So it's it was a good nod into that, but I really did love the little comment that he made over to A Train, and then there's A Train just one more time having to take another hit from one of these dipshits. It's just like, okay, they've done such a great job going from like A Train, who you didn't know how you really feel for him, but like really making him into a full-fledged like human who's struggling with his own not so much his own identity of who he is, but what he is to everybody else. And I liked seeing he didn't have a lot in this episode, but the two little moments we got with him I thought were really powerful.
Right. The part with the slave catching and what he says to him was very funny. I got a really big kick out of that. Yeah. Anyone who's watched, and, you just have to watch, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver over the years, or among other things, to understand and know what the American prison system is, and,
Yeah.
and the privatization of prisons, and how that's such a moneymaker. So again, it's interesting to have a character who's supposed to be essentially the Bruce Wayne of this universe. And Bruce Wayne in, the comics is someone who's known for like the Wayne Foundation, and he does very benevolent and altruistic things and whatever. And this is a family fortune built on slave money, slavery, slave money. And now has taken that to the prison system. It's almost a very natural progression there. And that's also when we find out, I mentioned last week, we saw that little moment between Sister Sage and Tech Knight, where he was looking over something that looked like some sort of journal or something.
Yes.
And he was reacting to it. And apparently what he was reacting to, because this is Sister Sage's plan. She's the one who's putting all this together. And part of where he would come into play would be to make use of his prisons to keep or lock away quote unquote dissidents of what will happen in the near future, which is just another way of saying these will be prison camps. They'll be camps, however you want to say it. If you want to go as far as calling them concentration camps, you can. That is clearly where this is all going, and why people, when the plan comes out, why people are reacting to it the way they are. So, Huey, meanwhile, he has to have all these horrors after the horrors of dealing with what happened to his father. And he's trying to shelve his grief in this episode by immersing himself in this mission. And instead, he's getting immersed in chocolate cake and so many fluids. And
it's so much.
I know. Oh, and one needs to mention that, speaking of silly parodies, the fact that the character he's masquerading as is, I believe, called Web Weaver. Clearly supposed to be this rather nasty swipe at Spider-Man, who, as we learned earlier in the episode, is a character who can literally generates webbing out of a hole right above his ass. We'll get that would be the other ill scene of the episode. We're going to get to that in a second, actually.
I just keep thinking about my fireman down the street. That word, it's going to get a hell of a lot weirder.
But I did think that his breakdown that he has while he's with Annie at the end of the episode was kind of the key moment for him. Maybe not just the episode, but maybe even the season itself, because he's been dealing with the weight of what had happened before, to begin with, before the season. Then the stuff with his father, of course, and his mother returning, and all the emotional baggage of that, not to mention then, your girlfriend's abortion that you were part of, so to speak, gets, told from coast to coast, whatever. And then he had a fucking youth, like I said, you just had to euthanize your own dad just a couple days ago.
Yeah, and then he had to go on a Made in Manhattan tour.
I Made in Manhattan. That was amazing. So then
he's been through a lot of trauma. I love when he says, "Oh, well, focusing on work is what I really need to do." Well, like everybody with a brain knows, this isn't going to go well.
Yeah, the minute you say that, it's not going to go well.
Mm-hmm.
But just it was kind of one of the few truly emotional moments of the episode when he cracks at the end.
Yeah.
Speaking of characters who may be cracking, we're going to switch to the character that we're going to try to, from this point on, refer to as MM, since I keep getting caught up in, do I call him Marvin? Do I call him Mother's Milk? It's kind of like the Annie Starlight thing. But then when I heard someone call him MM, I was like, oh, I think we did that once upon a time. It's easier. Let's just say go MM or Eminem if we want to go call him that. So the thing I thought was interesting in this episode with him is that I like that they're kind of, it feels like they're really filtering his OCD stuff into the episode, and which is the more I think about the fact that they've established that he has some sort of OCD issues. We've seen it through things he does, through, the everything in its right place sort of, idea. And he's chanting mantras in this episode to try to, he's listening to tapes, whatever. But the problem is if you're someone who has something, even in the realm of OCD, trust me, I know what I'm talking about here. And not that I have OCD. I like to say I have fake OCD.
It's OCD light.
Oh yeah, at that, at best. But it's trying to control things which are clearly beyond you. And that's what his task has been. And throughout this episode, it from the very start, from the fact that Butcher is MIA to the fact the entire mission just goes truly off the rails. He is being more open about his issues to a certain extent, but I think it's because it's more that he's not able to hide them as much as before. And then, especially when he encounters Sister Sage and she pretty much lays out that she clearly knows everything about him, right up to the fact that she knows that his daughter was just suspended for fighting.
Yeah.
And then, which automatically puts him into and now my family's at risk thing,
Sure.
which again, I think he also should have thought about when he went and stopped Annie on national TV and the cameras caught him. So it's not like,
There's no secrets anymore. But Sage is smart enough too to reckon, it's not just knowing the family and what's happening with his family and that his daughter got in trouble at school and so on. It's knowing that he suffers from such high levels of anxiety that he's developed OCD. And knowing exactly what to pluck, to get those nerves going.
right.
That's the kind of thing that's going to make anybody who cares about the family, obviously it's going to make them nervous. You start putting their kid's name in your mouth. But specifically when he's supposed to be the leader of all of these people and he's working with Soups, what's really going to take him down? It isn't just I'm going to threaten your family. I don't have to threaten your family. I'm just going to antagonize your OCD.
Right. And that's what culminates in his panic attack, which, is basically one step away from having an actual heart attack. It's interesting that you have two different characters who are similar, but in so many ways are the opposite of each other as far as how they handle people and things. And that would be Butcher and MM. And at one time or another, they've been the leaders of this little squad, whatever. And they are both, and now at this point, they both have such obvious and clear and serious health issues, which are really the main hindrance for either one of them. Butcher is collapsing in pain from what's going on in his brain, whatever. And now MM has gone to the point of having panic attacks. And once you have the one, and especially where, okay, you're on the track to have an actual heart attack, and now that everyone knows who you are, which makes your family vulnerable, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
How can one say you're not going to be in this, not just the same, but an even worse position at some point? So it gets interesting because it's one of those things like, well, does that mean that neither one of them really should be involved or in charge of this group? It's a very dysfunctional bunch. I mean, they've always been dysfunctional, obviously.
It really is. But to me, it almost looks like what we saw in today's episode, even though Huey had to have a moment of breaking down and like releasing all of it. It's like Huey's the only one fit to lead at this point. I mean, even though he's going through so much stuff, he honestly, like, I don't know, he's I feel like he's making better decisions than the two volunteer leaders of this group have made, even though he got himself into a
Uh,
a really compromised position.
I, I, I
Uh,
I think Huey's, what's the word I'm looking for? I think there are reasons why Huey would be a good person to put at the helm, but I don't know that Huey has any of the strategic acumen to be the person in charge. Um, he's also not the best at improvising, as we saw
he's
how
definitely not
how bad
great at
how
improvising,
bad he
but
was at trying to be web weaver. Just like,
bro,
hey, bro, man.
I like your orchid paintings on the stairway. Um, um,
Oh man.
I guess basically where I'm coming from is the idea of like, Butcher has his own reasons for wanting to lead, but there's some maliciousness in there. And then you got MM and his want to lead, but he's battling with controlling elements that in a world that's uncontrollable. Like, is he going to come to that place where he can balance that? Huey is the it's the stereotype of the person who's the least suspecting to be the leader, the one who wants it the least, makes it themselves the best leader.
Hmm.
Because there is no power grab, there's no major struggle in there. He just wants to do the right thing for the right reasons.
Okay, it's a valid POV. I just personally I don't know if I personally agree with it
He
because
does need to go into some training
my my, feel,
how
my
to act on your toes.
I'm still probably going to lean towards if Butcher doesn't have the tumor going on in his head, then it's Butcher. Because the one thing that, despite, unless we're including what happened with his dad, and one can use that as the one thing to push back at me here, um, I feel Butcher's the one more likely to make the hard decisions that need to happen. I know he just killed his dad, so I know that
Yeah.
that should count. But I that
No, I get what you're
that's
saying.
that's kind
Butcher
of a
has
different
that.
situation. But
Butcher
we'll see.
definitely has that ability. And I mean, even Annie's like, I hate to say it, but we could really use Butcher.
Right.
Because he does bring something specific to the table.
Yeah. So we had mentioned Sister Sage and how she revealed how she knows all about MM, and then we know more about the plan with the prisons and the camps and the this and that. That's all fun and good and cool. But I thought the really brilliant thing with her in this episode wasn't, you know, she gave us a great dramatic moment in this episode, and she gave us a great comedic moment in this episode. The dramatic moment was when she's talking with, I think she's when she's talking to Vicky Newman, I want to say.
Yep.
And she talks about when I think it's when she was 11 years old and her grandma had like stage 3 leukemia, etc. And within a matter of days, she actually came up with a cure, but she wasn't taken seriously. They basically laughed it off. Granny died. And that's when, at some point she realized, and then you realize the thing about her being like, the quote unquote smartest person in the world, she could literally solve the world's problems. She can cure cancer. She could end
Yep.
hunger. She could she could at least put us on the track for fixing climate control. You name it. But based on what happened to her as a child and probably treatment from that point on as well, it's pretty much fuck the human race. I don't know. And
Yeah, we really got the villain origin story with her on that.
yeah, I thought that was really effective. And it didn't take long to tell us, but I was like, okay, got it. It makes sense. And whenever you get an origin, especially for for a villain, but when it's understandable, then it's like, okay, you're still a villain, but at least I understand why you're operating that way and why you wouldn't necessarily see it as you're being evil so much as you're doing what you think this is what is deserved, so to speak. It's kind of like, say, I don't mean to use another black character, but it's just coincidental. It's kind of like the Killmonger character in the first Black Panther movie when you see the Michael B. Jordan character. Really good villain. And one of the reasons that character was good was because when you see the origin and what happened to that character, it's like, oh, you can kind of see it from that character's perspective and it kind of makes sense. I mean, half the reason you think he's a villain is because he's going up against the guy that is your hero. And so I was like, well, then naturally he must be the villain. So with her, especially since they're in, she's one of the people who's in this room, filled with, the epitome of, the elitist white upper class that looks down on people like her and so on and so forth, which is happening to everyone in this episode. Vicky Newman having to listen to the senator kind of parrot that thing that.
Oh yeah. There's so many tears that are taking place. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So you have all that for the dramatic side. And then later, after MM shoots her in the head, and we already know, like, oh, it's like the lobotomy, so we know she's not dead, but I wonder if it had a lobotomizing effect. And clearly it did have an effect like that. So, so when she's just sitting there, with cake smeared on her face when the Homeland is going, oh, it's so good.
Well, and I think it's interesting the two other times that we have seen her, like with her at self-given lobotomies, there's a couple different things. One, snacks are always involved. Something about a lobotomy in this woman, just like it's food. Food comes into play. And then two, like the last time when she was with the Deep, she said, like, I will be nice. Like, it'll make me nice. And here she is, and she's just so sweet and like lovable, and just the face that she makes when she's eating that cake and like looks across the room over to Victoria, and there's the head nodding. Like, I died.
Right. This seemed to be more extreme than her self-lobotomizing.
Yes.
Because
she's almost childlike.
She's childlike here. Whereas with lobotomizing, I mean, when she lobotomizes herself, she just takes herself down to, now I'm just a dumb hoe kind of thing.
Like to the level of Deep, right?
Right. So, and then I mean, we already touched on him a little bit already. The flip side to her in this episode, I think may very well be A-Train. There's so many things there's moments I really like that he had, because he has his fears of still being suspected as the leak. And especially when he tells MM about what happened, about, having to, beating Coleman to death. And you can kind of start seeing the little bits of guilt kind of forming here and there. The fact that he literally runs to Toronto to avoid someone like Homelander overhearing him on the phone, I thought was kind of a nice little touch. Like, oh, that actually kind of makes fucking sense. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But he has that, and of course you already mentioned the moments during the episode when he has to hear like the racist, the clearly racist bullshit at the party, right. Whatever. But it's the moment when he's convinced and he whisks MM to the hospital, and he puts him in a gurney, whatever. And then he stops, and there's the kid who sees him, and you see the kid kind of smiling in admiration, and then you kind of realize it's conceivable because of all the bullshit that Vought and the Seven really seem to be all about. It's conceivable this might be as close as he's gotten to an actual save, if not ever, maybe at least in a very long time.
Yep.
Yes, it does turn out to be, it's not really a save, but he doesn't know that at the moment.
Right.
In his mind it is.
And it was at risk of himself too. It wasn't just a save because he's a superhero that can save. Like, he put himself in risk to do it.
Yeah, it's not to evoke anything else, based on his blackness, but he's doing the right thing. Anyway, so
I love that like little recognition on his face too when the kid smiles and he like, you can see him like, oh, this is admiration. How long has it been? How long has it been since I've seen this? And there's just this little hope that, in there somewhere is that guy that his brother knows he is. Who his brother always expected of him. Who he always let his brother down, but that's the guy right there.
Or the guy's brother wanted him to be,
Yeah,
and now thinks he can't be. He's
can't
not.
be. Right.
So the rest of the episode, you've got, well, we haven't touched on a couple of biggies. And they're kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum, so to speak. You've got Annie on one side and Homelander, on the other, or Starlight and John, whatever. You had mentioned it already. I thought it was kind of really interesting when she noted how they could really use Butcher, and because she's really loath to say that, you know. But I guess, she doesn't have a lot. That's it's no, that true is truly noteworthy in this episode. Although I guess one could point to when she tries to give a truly heartfelt apology to Firecracker and really admit the way she was,
Yeah.
and that Firecracker was certainly not the only person she was horrible to during all those years. So she does deserve credit for being able to give an apology. People on the Bear should watch to see how to apologize. Anyway, yeah, there's a sneak preview of a future podcast. Anyway, but I don't really know if there's as much to talk about with her, at least from my perspective, that we haven't mentioned already. But Homelander, on the other hand, there was so much to enjoy watching this with Homelander this week, which was so different than a lot of the Homelander stuff we've gotten in the past. At least for this season, I mean. This wasn't simply Homelander taking over a room and being a dominating character and threatening everybody and scaring the fuck out of everybody. This is Homelander in a room where no one's scared of him, which is very interesting, very unique, because he's sitting in the midst of this room of they're billionaires, but their power is all derived from money and political office. And as we see, especially in the last act of this episode, he doesn't have either the knowledge or the patience to deal with like all the ripples that such a takeover that they had planned would end up causing. And because, Homelander, if he had his way, he'd probably just do like mass executions and just run things like a god king.
Yeah, he's never had to be in a position where he had to clean up his own mess.
Right. But if he did go about things that way, like those fantasies we saw him have in previous seasons where he just basically, heat visioned out an entire swath of people, whatever. But the problem would be then it would all be based on fear, not just the likely mass extermination of, millions or even billions. The problem would then be, where would be the love? There would be no love. It would only be fear. So when he's in that room and he's trying to lay out the plan of what they're going to do with Newman taking over, and then they start bringing up all the different issues. And it's very funny. There is there's one funny thing when someone mentions the Justice Department, and he was talking about like, oh, we'll just put in our own people. It's like, oh, that's more than us. That's more than
that sounds vaguely familiar.
That's more than a reference to something else that we all know is going on in the world today. But you notice they start peppering with one thing after the other, and how, the problems and why this won't work. And that's where you get the humor part of it, where he keeps looking over to Sage, thinking she'll snap out of it. And no, it doesn't. No. That lasts more than just a few minutes, sir. You don't know what's going on here. And that's when Vicky Newman takes the lead, and she's the one who ends up winning over the room, which is truly significant when you realize she's actually a member of the other political party.
Yep.
Which is what makes this whole kind of takeover thing that much more interesting, because, it's a room of, essentially it's supposed to be a room of Republicans and she's a Democrat, but she's kind of aligning herself with them, especially as far as what she wants to do as far as soups and so on.
Oh, I thought it was so great because there's so many different things at play. One, you're seeing Homelander, like you said, in a room full of people where he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And they basically just told him, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And his superpowers be damned. They're not afraid of him. And so you're watching this struggle happen. And the one real like power source he has, she's immobilized.
Right.
And to watch Victoria like scan the room, read the room, understand the situation, immediately jump it and just put herself in there because her ultimate goal isn't to embolden the Republican or the Democratic Party. She wants the power. She wants to call the shots.
Right.
And she just walked in there, took it, and the biggest thing is she just took it out of Homelander's hands.
Mm-hmm.
And no bloodshed, no powers, like no special powers used. She just walked in and yoinked.
You need it in a room that is both just, billionaire donors and politicians. What you need there to work that room is a politician. Homelander is not a
Yep.
politician.
Yep.
She is. She's politically savvy. Because if you listen to what she says, she doesn't actually really address pretty much any concern that was said, but she redirects the conversation in a way, and there's a certain confidence and perceived knowledge with how she speaks, and that's what wins them over. And
Yeah, she
and candidates have been doing that for 200 years.
Yep. And she essentially looked at all of them and said, "You're billionaires. You should be able to do what you want."
Yeah. Yeah, it's the easy way to appeal, and it also sounds vaguely familiar. I don't know, but anyway, but we're gonna keep tiptoeing that line. Like, yeah, I don't wanna. So back to Homelander and someone else, and I'm thinking about Firecracker.
Firecracker? You mean Marjorie Taylor's space lasers?
Don't. What sucks? About wait, should I bring this up on the podcast? I already opened the door. I already started.
It's already happened, man.
So, when that whole thing happened about, what was it, a year or 2 years ago, whatever it was, with the whole Jewish space lasers,
Yep.
and I couldn't wrap my head around that. I couldn't stop finding it funny. It sounded like something out of a Mel Brooks movie or something. And it might have been for Christmas, maybe, or Hanukkah, if you want to look at it that way. Someone got me a T-shirt that was like a Jewish space lasers T-shirt, and it has like the Star of David and whatever. And I said, "Oh, that's a great shirt, whatever." And then I soon realized, and has become more so over the last several year or so. I live in a neighborhood in Brooklyn where there is a very heavy Middle Eastern and pro-Palestinian contingent where there's protests and whatever. And let's just say
it might be a little bit inflammatory.
It might not be the best shirt for me to wear.
Yeah,
I did wear it once.
Bring up some uncomfortable conversation.
I wore it once, and there was some reaction to it. I mean, nothing, no fisticuffs or anything like that, but they weren't even getting. And I was like, oh God, I was like, all right, I guess this is going to be one of the shirts that I can wear if I'm traveling somewhere else.
There you go.
I apparently can't wear it around I can't go into my local bodega, and the guy just look at me like, what is this?
I loved so much that they did this. I mean, because it's obvious that, who she was kind of modeled after, like what this character was modeled after. But to just flat out bring out the Jewish space lasers, just like bam, like there's no like innuendo. Like this is who they're poking fun at. Period.
Yeah, again, this season they're kind of squaring things up and just hitting nails on the heads as opposed to doing anything that is even remotely. Wait, could that mean? No, they're just pretty much saying it this season.
Which is even more disturbing and kind of hilarious when you focus in on the end of the episode and what her job is now going to be associated into.
We spent part of this podcast and previous ones going back and forth of either we call, Marvin or Mother's Milk, and speaking it. So now we have actual Mother's Milk or at least a drug-induced boob juice kind of situation, which
causes, just some heart enlargement.
Right. But it finally fills a hole for Homelander that's probably been there since the end of season one after he
Yep.
had murdered Madeline Stillwell, who back then was the one who was providing him with both manipulative love and mammary lactation. Um, and those, I think that's what I think there are. If I'm not mistaken, I think in the episode where an A train is going through his quarters, that
Yes.
isn't one of the things he finds other than the gray pubes is jars or bottles of what looks to be breast milk.
Breast milk. Yep.
So the fact he can get it straight directly from the udder, so to speak, here, and you have that image,
Sourced.
and you have that
Locally sourced.
right, and you have that image of him like on her lap, with the cape draped around him. It's kind of a nice composed image with the flag behind him and everything.
Oh, it really is. And again, another jab, really at politics in America today and what it's feeding off of, and the sick, twisted relationship that is.
Right. So, there were other things that happened in the episode. Again, I kind of detest doing super recaps. So if we're leaving certain things a little more on the high and dry side, is because they just, at least for me personally, I
Yeah.
wasn't super interested in them. Kamiko trying to see Frenchie throughout the episode and he keeps refusing her.
Question on that.
Mm.
Do we know is I'm assuming it is, but there's a little part of me that questions it too. Is she trying to see Frenchie or is she trying to see that um the person that she's run into in the past in this season? I forget what her name was, and she said, "You brought me for ice cream," and
No,
you
she's trying
know
to see Frenchie.
it is okay
It's
because I
Frenchie.
didn't know if it was the same prison there or if it was the same jail or not because we are getting a different angle because when he came in we saw it from the point of view of the window, so I wasn't sure if it was the same one. um do you do you think that he's out for the season, like this is just how we're not going to have him in for the rest of the season?
No, if that's what they end up doing, then for all the criticism this season has gotten, and we haven't really gotten too much into it for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why, actually. That would be the epitome of, well, then why did you have this character on in the season at all, if that's what you were going to do with him? Because so I would find I would actually just come out and say that would be a big fail on the part of the creator and writers of the show if that's all you did with that character. Because I would be like, well, then what was the point of this? It I see no reason for it. It's already worrisome that we only have 2 episodes left, and
That's kind of where
there's
I'm going at. It's like there's 2 episodes, and this episode, all we had of either Kamiko or Frenchie was 2 different times of her trying to go in and them saying, "Oh, the prisoner says they don't want visitors."
I have to believe that they'll find a way to make better use of them, dramatically speaking, in one or both of the next 2 episodes, because otherwise, then they failed both characters. And even though they have been renewed, they do have one more season after
Hmm.
that, and I believe that will be the final season from everything I've heard. Um, I'm still not sure if that excuses that. Again, I think both you and I mean, I guess I don't want to speak, I should not speak for you, so I'll just speak for myself. Um, I like this season. I don't dislike the season.
Yeah.
Do I think the season is as strong as previous seasons? I'm going to say I don't. I don't, again, and wait to hear a different podcast coming soon. That's going to be interesting because I keep going back and forth on another show, which we're going to be covered on this not this specific episode, but on this podcast. And I literally, like, I comment on someone's Facebook page, like, wow, I don't have remotely as negative a take as you do. And then I start thinking about it for the next hour. So I was like, oh, maybe I do. Oh, maybe I do. Oh, I don't know. Oh, it's going to be it's going to be a weird podcast. It's going to be a weird one, but sticking to the show that we're talking about here with the boys. Um, and in a weird, and maybe it's almost a similarity. So kind of a very slight spoiler for what I might say about a certain other show. Um, the problem I'm having with the season, to put it simply, and it's not a big problem. I'm still enjoying it. I like talking about it. I love, still like it. I do, two things. And they're kind of, they connect to each other. Number one, the overall plotting of the show and the construct of the episodes moving forward, I don't feel it's as tightly focused as it has been in previous seasons.
Yeah.
And I get that you're going to have separate storylines with different characters. I also feel that's to whatever extent has always been the case. Just because you're giving, I don't know, just because you're giving A Train a little bit more time here or there shouldn't impact the show in a negative way, etc. But I think the fragmenting of the group has not helped. I think it's hurt it. And by doing that, some characters have kind of fallen by the wayside as far as having really strong narratives this season. And it's like, oh, Kamiko could be a cool character if you actually utilized her more than, okay, except for when we have a big fight scene once every 3 or 4 episodes. And then you have this thing with her past, which has really still hardly been touched on. And it's after 6 episodes. It
It
gets
really doesn't.
hinted at. And it's
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, either do it or don't.
I'm gonna have to agree with that. It kind of feels like when it comes in at this point, I'm not interested to learn about it. To me, it's taking time away from something else
right
at this point.
and I don't, again, my issue with the season, it's not simply that one. That's such a, quite frankly, that's like 2% of the season, maybe,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yep.
I'm just using it as an example. It applies to Frenchie, but guess what? Here's where it's going to get a bit more, really? It applies to Huey, because we spent like, what, 6 episodes? So at least
In the hospital.
four of those episodes, Huey was mostly just in the hospital with his dad. And,
Yep.
I love Simon Pegg and I like but there was part of me was like, hey, could that have been done in like 1 episode or 1.5 episodes? Maybe, I don't know, but maybe you could have tightened that up. Butcher's got the reason, at least with Butcher being separate from everyone else. There's a strong narrative reason for it because what's been going on in his head between the Becca and the Kessler thing.
Yeah.
And it would get a little bit weird if we were playing who's he talking to in front of everybody all the time. That might get a little goofy. I get that. Plus Butcher, there is a certain lone wolf. He's always had that lone wolf quality about him throughout the series. But everyone else, it's just,
It's kind of, this is a common thing that you will see in other shows where you have a group of people. You get into 3 or 4 seasons, something happens, the group gets separate. Like they get separated.
Yeah. Right.
And then it's like, then nothing really runs as smoothly until that group's back together again.
Well, here's the thing. The difference is, the example that's usually that I always use for that, because I've talked about that before, way back when on this podcast, probably before you were even on this podcast. And the show and because we're all fans of it on the show, on the super podcast. The one I know, the easiest one to use is Lost.
Yes.
And people who watch Lost, especially if you watch the first few seasons, was, everyone's together. Then by the end of the season, you have a couple go there. But then when you get to the second season, it starts to break apart. And then third season, all of a sudden it's much worse because you have some people over here, some people over there.
Right.
And and then you feel like, okay, we're going to spend most, if not all of the season, just trying to get everybody back together. And that is pretty much what the concept is for the season. And sometimes it feels like it's a drag or it's a waste of time or it's frustrating or it's kind of annoying. And I feel like that, and that's not, there's like the one that can come up with 12 other shows that have done the same or similar kind of ideas. It's like, Game of Thrones has done that, certainly. Think of those, and they're great seasons, but all like, oh, but so and so is over here, and so is in a ship over there, and we're going to spend 5 seasons waiting for this character to eventually converge with everybody, because it's going to take, it seems, years for her to get there, until later on, where suddenly everyone can get everywhere like within 5 minutes. I don't, I don't know how.
It's true.
I don't know how people started to learn how to move stuff. It's like, and we're not talking about people on fucking dragons either. Anyway,
this is on foot. Yeah.
But here, it's just that this is it's supposed to be, the whole point of this, it's a squad of people who have this mission. and
It's the boys.
they're almost hardly ever together
Yes.
in this season. So and when you do that, again, it's not that we don't have interesting or colorful characters, and there's not some, and the Homelander stuff has been interesting, and the Sage stuff has been kind of interesting, whatever. But when you lose some of the dynamics, the group dynamics and interactions that has kind of made the show really as just as noteworthy as the gore or the perversity or the humor, it's the chemistry and the interaction between characters. And when they're not there to interact with each other, well, guess what? Then that's something I think is more at the core of the show. And when the core becomes, if not empty, but it becomes that somewhat more hollow, then the season as a whole doesn't feel quite as satisfying as it did the previous I mean, think of the season with Soldier Boy. We were 6 episodes in. I think we were probably a lot more raving about it. The season was it the season before that with Stormfront and all that?
Yep.
Oh, crazy. And then season one, I never like using season one to compare to any show, because season one is about you're getting to know and introducing everybody.
Right.
And
You're getting your base.
so it's almost not, it's always not fair to use that to compare to any, but you know what I mean? Again,
Yep.
and as I keep saying, I like the season. I don't love the season, but I like it enough to keep talking
Yes.
about. I'm not like it, it's not even like, Fargo season 4 where it's like, I like it, but this still feels like The Boys to me. It just feels like it's been better, and I hope it will get better in its final season. The fact that there are some who feel they've kind of leaned more into, the parallels with what the politics in the world today, whatever, putting aside our joking about how the show has always had that, and of course it has, and maybe they're just being a little bit more on the nose about it this season.
Sure.
Yes, they are. Does it bother me? No, it doesn't bother
No.
me. And I am someone who, speaking, politically speaking, I tend to lean more on the liberal side, more on the Democratic side, though I can see both points of view at times. But I'll tell you, I watched a show like The Good Fight, which was the spinoff of The Good Wife. And, the character that they spun off was probably one of my two favorite characters on The Good Wife. And I liked The Good Fight. However, there was at least especially one season, where they leaned so heavily into the anti-Trump stuff. And I am certainly not a Trump supporter by any stretch of the imagination. But even I was like, you know what? It's not just a bit much. It's too much, because it's like, I don't, not just that I'm tired of being reminded about what's going on in the real world. It's like, it's just, I'm not, this isn't Saturday Night Live, guys. I don't, which is, do all the jokes there
Right.
you want. It's like, I want to watch this for something else. I don't mind you touching on it here and there. I mean, the fact that that whole series opens with her reacting to Hillary not winning, which I thought was brilliant at the time. Like, oh, that's perfect. But when you have an entire season, I was like, oh, and they started to play into all the silly stuff, the rumors about it. It's like, stop it, guys. It's just now, because this is the kind of shit that they point to when they go, it's like, hey, Hollywood and liberals and blah, blah, blah. Here.
But see, The Boys gets away with it because they just openly mock it, and then they flip around and point fingers at the other side and then mock that. And then they just mock humans, and then and then they mock themselves.
Well, it's kind of like a South Parkian kind of way of going about
Right.
things, where South Park goes after everybody. So,
Exactly.
and the idea is, if you go after everybody, then that means you shouldn't be held accountable by anybody. And there's some truth to that. And
I do have to give the writers a little bit of credit on this, though, as much as it has been frustrating to have the boys all kind of separate and doing their own thing, and the storyline getting a little loosey-goosey, is that we are watching them kind of separate and fall apart. Their unity is going away, but as the unity is and there's bickering, like there's infighting, we're also seeing a Homelander tighten in the reins, bring in a group, bring in unity, picking the people he wants, and like getting that level that he didn't have with the Seven.
right.
So there's the juxtaposition of that happening, but The really important question that I have for you, Scott, is why does everybody in the boys want to go to fucking Branson? What is this? I need to know why this is a thing this season. We've mentioned Branson like 4 times. I need to know what is the deal with Branson.
I'm going to Branson.
It's just,
Oh,
it's just
my.
when our new noir is talking about how he's got a gig in Branson, I just
That's
came
right.
unglued. I came
Right.
unglued. I'm like,
Yeah,
no,
that you
why?
know what that is, and then that reminds me that is one other interesting moment that was touched on in the episode that I kind of left out because it was so brief and it was so separate. Look, separate. The kids that were left behind, so to speak, with the seven were specifically Deep and the new slash old slash whatever you want to call it, Black Noir, and we get a little information about him. It's like because we know that he's actually. I love the idea that that's a guy who can actually fly but he
Yeah,
can't
I can.
as a member of the
Like
seven. It's
I
like
can actually fly.
I
Well, yeah,
thought,
dude, I know you can
but
fly.
there was one interesting thing in that scene was with the deep and the way he talked about whether he was regarded as a joke or whatever, but his talk about violence
Hmm.
and we, although we know he's participated, he was one of the three who were involved in beating the three dudes to death with the bats and stuff. And he was the one who was that Newman had execute the other political operative candidate that time and from the previous season, whatever. And some of those things maybe we shouldn't forget that he's done these things. And this is the first time the scene where he talks about violence and there's a certain relish to it. And how I think, even over the course of these seasons that we've seen that character, and again, that's a character that's mostly been used as comic relief more than anything else. And just, oh, look, you can be a soup and be sad. And look, hey, look, the boys are so funny because they're making Aquaman-like jokes. Wow, that's so fucking original. Sorry, it just pisses
Yeah,
me off.
he gets usually the view he gets is just kind of being the pathetic guy.
Right. But then when you hear him talk, and and it's interesting because especially when it's, this is a geeky show, it's part of comic book culture and geeky culture, and unfortunately, to a certain extent, fandom and fan bases of things like comic books or sci-fi, whatever, always have that certain segment of the audience, which are like, if you want to go really nasty, the incel type,
Yes.
whatever's,
Yep.
and the people who kind of, and who thrive on that kind of, either be misogynistic or violence or whatever. And you see that building in the character of the Deep. And it makes me curious to see, and it may not necessarily even be this season. It may be something that more is going to be for the next season. I'm going to, I'm gonna use a word that they like on the boys, but I don't like using, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Since I was such a pussy, I didn't bring up my theory last week, which I should have done, like everybody else in the whole world. I'm gonna say it probably won't be this season because they only got two left and whatever. But I got a feeling when we get into the next season, I just think the Deep is gonna play a much bigger part, and it's gonna be something which is just much more because of his enjoyment of the violence and how that's what makes him feel important and to dominate and to keep them from laughing at him anymore. And
Yep.
I just think there's a reason there's a scene here. There's a reason why he's been used in these different ways over the last two seasons, whatever. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I bet there'll be like at least one thing that'll happen in the next two episodes, which will kind of be like, oh, fuck with him. And I just feel it's going to be, this is setting him up to be a much bigger deal in the fifth season.
Oh yeah, especially when he's talking about, OG Noir about like just how much he idolizes him and his like the lust for violence he had and like, killing out that entire village and
Right.
the admiration. Like you've never heard him talk about Homelander that way.
Right.
This
That's
is the
true.
first time you've actually heard him be like, I really look up to somebody, and what he looks up to him for, and it's great too because he thinks he knows this guy so well, but has no clue why the Bucky Beaver thing is there. You know,
I love,
like
I love them bringing that up again. Oh, the only thing I found is this box of Bucky Beaver drawings. I don't
I
know what
have
the
no
fuck
idea
that
why
was.
that's there.
When they, oh, it was funny when they mentioned that. I suddenly that it took me right back to that episode. It's like, oh, remember what a great and crazy episode that
It was
fucking was.
fantastic.
Alrighty then. I'm gonna say we can shift over, and we can shift over to the other series that we like to talk about here. Although I'm very proud of that conversation. That was what I think that might have been our best boys conversation the whole fucking season. But now we're going to see if we can do likewise for another little show, and that show is called Evil. Now, the title of this one, well, you know what? It depends on what source you prefer to believe. It's
Yes,
either
please enlighten me.
it's either how to dress a wound or how to bandage a wound. Now, when I watched it on Paramount Plus, and you pause it, the title comes up. It says how to dress a wound. Okay, that's what it says on my TV screen. Terrific. Great. But it's not just on IMDb, but even on the Evil Wiki itself, which is where all the depository for all evil information is. It says how to bandage a wound. And I was like, you know what? I'm going by what it said on damn TV.
Yep.
It's how to dress a wound. It's a slightly more interesting way to phrase it. And you know what? No one cares. So I'm just going to move on. And speaking of things that are just totally trivial, but to get out of the way, I'll do what I did in the previous couple podcasts. We don't get the intro credits until almost 23 minutes into this episode. And by the way, I also do not recall any use of of a book, the pop-up or whatever, the little
Not,
text, whatever, which, by the way, would have indicated what the fucking title was. Because the title is always in that book. The fact they didn't have that in there, I keep thinking, is this them being evil? And they're just fucking with us. Like, maybe the title is, we're not going to show you that, which has been in every fucking episode somewhere, but not this
yeah.
episode. Anyway, I know I didn't black out. I know. So whatever. But the disclaimer pop up this week, it said, you will not be haunted if you skip Netflix intros.
I loved it.
Now, my initial reaction to that, when I chuckled, to myself, ha ha. Oh, my initial thought was, oh, they're mocking Netflix, because, I think the first time any of us became aware of or got into the whole skip intro thing was actually from watching Netflix. They were the first, whether they were when, I think everyone assumes they were the first streamer
Looking
to
at
do
you,
that.
Orange is the New Black. Yikes.
Yeah. But I realized, I gave it a bit more thought, like I've been doing for things lately, because I've got time on my hands. I realized it's kind of the opposite. They're not mocking Netflix. I know you think they are. They're not. And you're like, what? What are you talking about, Scott? Fuck you. You're crazy. No, yeah, I am. But here's my theory. Here's my other theory. This is supposed to be the final season of Evil. It sounds like they kind of want to do more. But there were some weird, wacky issues that kind of led to, nope, this is going to be it. Now, one could say it was maybe CBS or Paramount Plus didn't want to foot the bill any longer. There was supposedly some issues with one of the people on the show had to leave during the last week of filming, which was actually the actress who plays Kristen, because she came out and tweeted about that in response to an article saying, we all want the show to continue. I did have to leave early because I had some family business. I think something was wrong with her dad, in fact. So I wasn't available for the last 6 days of shooting, blah, blah, blah. That isn't a reason to just can a fucking series. Now, however, Evil is actually doing very well streaming service wise. And it's also a show, one of those few shows which is available on multiple services. Mm-hmm. So yes, you have it on Paramount Plus, but a lot of people actually watch it on Netflix now. Now it's on Netflix. It's actually doing really well on Netflix. It's one of their top 10, watch shows on Netflix. So I kind of think this is maybe just kind of a little bit nudge to Netflix. Like, hey guys, if you'd like to bankroll another season here, look, you already got the viewership. People want it. You look like heroes. You've done this shit before. And guess what? we can tell you, we bet the fifth season of Evil probably better than the fourth/fifth season of Arrested Development. Oops, yes, yes. I love that I did a whole video about me defending Arrested Development, and then in retrospect, like, I didn't really like it very much. I love that I changed my mind. I keep finding old reviews I do of movies and things. It's like, wait, I told people I liked this movie? Was I drunk? Anyway, it's like, oh, I'm glad that blog is gone. I can't believe I said I liked that movie. Oh my God, what's wrong with me? Anyway, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about Evil. So Evil, this episode, let's get into it, because one of the fun things about, last episode was how it ended. When we were about to have the showdown of showdowns between Cheryl and Leland. And I like the fact that we rewind back a minute. So we begin with Leland once again entering the apartment, seeing the carnage, seeing what's scrawled in blood on the floor and so on, and then having the face off, knife off, with Cheryl. I gotta tell you, just that stuff, that was about 5, 7, whatever minutes that took up, whatever, that whole sequence. That alone made this a worthwhile episode. That made me so, and here's why it's really saying something. Look, I don't think most of us who watch this series have any great love for the Cheryl character.
No.
But we can enjoy her character at times, especially her and especially her interactions with Leland, and seeing the actors Michael Emerson and Christine Lottie. And Christine Lottie's been around for so long. I don't even, I started going, wait, I remember Christine Lottie being in things like in 1980. How old is she? Is she really taking some stuff there? Because I think she might be in her 70s or something like that. Maybe older. I'm not even sure. She might be 85. No, she's not 85. But, oh, this, everything from the dialogue and the maliciousness and the humor, and then the blood, and the stabbing and the this and the,
oh my God. And I love that they both like stab each other in like major arteries, and and she does the comment about, I told you I would cut your dick off, and then she aims for it.
It was so great. And you guess now, I think I mentioned once before that I've been a little befuddled by a couple of the titles this season. Because most of the titles, okay, I get where the title came from. And maybe it's when it's specifically tied to whatever the case is, and it's a clear connection to it. Okay,
right.
But then there was the one like how to. I'm still not clear on the how to make a coffin one. I don't really feel like going back and rewatching the episode, but I was like, but I don't know why they titled it. I don't know. This one, at least I kind of get it. It's like, although one can say, well, it's, you have the literal bandaging, dressing a wound in the episode, especially with what Leon's trying to do in the bathroom, whatever. Although when you watch it, it's like, really? That's why you titled the whole episode this? But one can also say it's the figurative phrasing of how to dress a wound, and, and what happens throughout the episode, the wound in the wall, for God's sake. And no, I have something to say about that. But the stuff I loved the most from the get-go was these two going at each other, and there's something about having a scene with Michael Emerson with this specific part, because he's so, and it's been said many times on this podcast, he's so deliciously, malevolently over the top. I mean, he's basically, he's taken pages out of fucking Nicholson's book from like Witches of Eastwick and shit, where like, I can just, because I'm playing a character like this, I'm allowed to go as nuts and go as goofy as possible. But what's interesting is when you're playing a scene against that, and you got to be careful, because it can work both ways. Because sometimes you'll have a character and they have to really be the opposite. They have to be restrained where he's not. They have to be, and more so, just like comedy, the best comedy is when the people in the scene who are playing the scene are taking it seriously. You're not playing it like comedy, and that's where the comedy derives from. So think of like earlier seasons. The scenes between David and Leland were so much fun because David was so fucking straight laced compared to, but here Cheryl isn't, quite, she's not quite as, stick up her ass the way a lot of the other characters can be on the show, whatever. So, and it's also Christine Ly's chance to kind of let it go, but it kind of works because he figured it's like that was what their connection kind of became, that they were both these absurdist, over the top, what the fuck kind of characters. So naturally they kind of clicked together, even though she should have known right from the get-go.
Yes.
It's like, really? Really? Did you expect someone who's, if
you really trusted him, like he wasn't going to cross the line?
Yeah. Granted, he's not he's not the devil. We get that. But if there's ever someone who's basically making devil-like bargains in this show, it's Leland.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Cheryl, have you ever, I don't know, watched an episode of The Twilight Zone or read a really cool short story every once in your life where when you make a deal with the devil, they kind of fuck you over. They always do. Every fucking time.
Yeah, I love I love, well, and she had the power there with the treatments, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I love when he's like, oh, it's going to be really fun to watch you age 20 years in 20 days, but it's that where you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Because, she talks about her grandkids and all of that, but it's her fucking vanity.
Oh, yeah.
That really put her in this position.
Right. I'm fascinated to see, I'm so fascinated to see where that's all going to go. So connecting to that, and then we go to the next thing, because, since it's still involving Leland, especially, we shift somewhat from Cheryl and Leland to the Kristen and Cheryl dynamic. Because with no one to help her, actually, that's not what happened. I'm getting two different episodes of television confused in my mind. Got my, it's that other show I haven't talked. I have to talk about it on another podcast. If you've seen the episode, you already know what I was referring to.
If you know.
That fucking episode. No. Kristen is contacted by the hospital because she's clearly the one listed as Cheryl's emergency contact. So, yes, we have all the interaction between the two of them, and whether it be Cheryl when she's barely able to speak at first, and she's just like, "Watch out," and then she's able to be a bit more verbose later on, although she doesn't say everything. That's mildly interesting to me, because Kristen's going to maintain her. Yeah, I got called here because you might be dying, but that's it. Nothing's changed. But
right,
that's what she's going to say. I don't care about that. I'll tell you what I cared about. And it came so close. It's like, oh, ooh. When she answers the phone and it's Leland. And, and Leland goes on his little murderous rant about her, whatever. And then Kristen makes it clear she's the one who's on the phone. And then you have that little back and forth between them. And then there's that moment. And it's great because there's nothing more interesting than when you see how fallible a villain can actually be, even if they don't realize it themselves. Kind of like Homelander in the episode we just discussed, and how he is when he can't wrap his head around how to deal with bureaucracy. Here, Leland is such an arrogant and such a spiteful and such an id of a character. You realize he was just on the precipice, was not going to stop. He was just about to blow up the entire Andy plan right there on the phone. He was clear. That's where he was going. He wasn't going to be leaving a hint about it. He was going to say it. And of course, Kristen has to fucking cut it off. And then I'm like, no, 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 no. Oh.
You almost got all the information.
You almost, I was so excited when Cheryl figured out everything about the daughter. It's like, wait, this is the other big domino. But of course it's going to be Kristen has to get in the way because, well, we're going to get into that a bit later because that's where I think me and Jamie are going to actually be in lockstep on something. And it's something you said last week. And now I'm going to switch to your side. But I'm gonna restrain that urge to go. Ooh, should I restrain that urge to go there? Ooh, let me think.
Nah, not today.
Nah, let's go there. Yeah. None of that. None of that tantric.
Let's do this.
This ain't a tantric podcast. I'm gonna get. Let's
Give it all right now.
All apologies to Huey. Anyway. Okay. All right. Good. It's okay because. Yeah, I can go there. Now, there was something you said last week, Jamie. And I think you were expressing some maybe mild frustration with Kristen's tendency to explain everything away, with some sort of pseudo-rational, psychological, blah, 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 disorder explanation for every goddamn thing that she sees as of late, whatever.
Yes.
When we feel she damn well knows that there's some crazy shit has happened, she's experienced it, which cannot be just waved off as some sort of trauma-induced hallucination or whatever. And either a man in black showed up and blinked out her fucking memory, or she's just gone into such denial about things. I don't know, but it gets a little frustrating with her. And I will admit in this episode, I was kind of frustrated with her a number of times because I kept going, you know what? There's been, 30 something. It's like, and a lot of those episodes, yes, everything was explained the way you could. But the shit that you were dealing with specifically, are you still telling me you think that was just really? It's kind of annoying. But there's something that, you know what? I'll take a pause because I know you want to respond to that. And then I will go on my other Kristen-related rant for this episode, which doesn't take away from the episode, but I want to rant about Kristen some. Okay, go.
Okay. She's seen a demon in her house multiple times. She chalks it up as a hallucination. She's got the weird gooey goblin thing that went down her pipe that she tried to flush down the toilet, and then her pipes got haunted, and then she had to have all of her plumbing redone. She's watched her husband, just do the weirdest shit. I mean, it's one thing after another thing after another thing after another thing. I'm sure it's like every episode there's something she witnesses.
Yeah, and you're not even touching on any number of the cases that she's dealt with where there have been clearly things like, yeah, that's not just someone just being
right.
a little cuckoo in the head.
Just in her own nucleus, in her own reality, in her own home, these things are happening. And then go into her professional career and all the things she's saying. But it's like you have a priest and you have a nun, and yeah, you have your wavering beliefs on their beliefs. Got that. But they're both telling you, dude, there's a demon in your house for reals. And the daughters are going, Mom, there's seriously a demon in this house. Just do the exorcism. Just fucking do it. Just do it. If you don't believe, it's okay. Everybody else does. Just do the damn thing. For one, this is where I get that she's a better mom than her mom is. But right. This is where, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree comes in too, because it's just do the thing that a mom is supposed to do and let them feel better, even if you don't believe it. Because what's the worst case scenario? It is real, and then you've helped the demon be removed from your home. Or, I don't know, patch up the big fucking hole in your basement that the bats fly out of. I mean, it's the simple things, Christine. It's the simple things.
Okay, since you kind of skipped right to it, so I'm gonna go there now. All right. Now, they'll never hear this podcast because we don't have that many listeners, so why would it even be on their radar? But if someone wants to ever clip this out and send it to Robert and I think Michelle King. Look, I've watched all your TV series. I've watched Your Good Wife. I've watched Your
Seen him
Good
all.
Fight. I've watched what was it, Brain Dead? I think that's one with Tony Shalhoub, and that was really fun and really prescient. And of course, Evil. And if there's another one I'm forgetting, just trust me, I probably watched that one too. And, there's been a need at times for a slight suspension of disbelief here and there. We either be, would a legal matter actually be handled that quickly or this or that, and all these different shows. And of course, on this show, whatever. But of course, we're dealing with, the paranormal and religions and demons. So of course, it's fantasy, whatever. And so, it's all about suspension of disbelief. You're going to enjoy this, whatever. And I'm all about that. Except for this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There has been this giant hole in the basement wall this entire time since they have moved there. This is the time I have to call bullshit. Bullshit on the Kings. And I'm going to tell you something, because there is no person in any major city per se, but especially there is no person in New York City. And especially if you're a person of means. You're not living below the poverty line. You're not, a step away from being homeless. You've got money. You've got multiple incomes in that house. It's a nice place. You make a decent living. You got a master's.
This isn't shameless.
No one would let there be such a thing in their house here in New York City. Trust me.
It only goes down a couple feet.
Because don't jump, don't step on it. Because I'm going there too. That's more about character stupidity than my issue with the writers. Here it's like, no, bugs, mice, apparently bats, but rats. God knows what else. In New York City, you've got a giant hole in your basement wall, with a cavern to God knows whatever. The rat reason alone makes this not unlikely, suspend. No, I cannot suspend my disbelief. I just thought it was the most utterly ridiculous thing ever. Why she didn't react? If they could have just had Kristen react like, where the fuck did that come from?
Right?
You're telling me you've had this giant hole in the wall this whole time, and it never occurred to anyone to try to patch it up? Oh, because you're having contractors work on that other fucking part of your house.
Yep.
You don't think a giant hole in that's
okay? She had contracted work in the other part of her house, but Andy was the one putting in the floor.
Andy's and
so why wasn't Andy patching the giant, human-sized hole in the wall?
She's got 4 children. And they've been there for a while, so that means they were younger at some point, which means they could have went down to the basement and then went in the goddamn hole in the wall. I'm thinking you don't want that to happen. Ridiculous. Slightly
100%.
less ridiculous, and you touched on it already. You jumped ahead of me, goddamn you. Was when Kristen said she thought it only went back a few feet. She says that in the episode. But think of when she says it. She doesn't say it before anyone enters. She says it after the fact. You were literally right there when Sister Andrea went walking into the hole with a light. You could see and hear how she was clearly much, much, much further away than just a few feet. This was one of those episodes I wanted to give Kristen such a shake. Just making me so,
all the time. That's what I mean. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It's the same stuff with her mom, where you're just like, who this guy is. Where you're making a deal with the devil here. It's the same weird suspended disbelief that they have. And I need to understand how anybody could study and work so hard to earn the degree that she has, is incapable of saying, hey, you know what? I don't want bats or rats or roaches in my house. I need to fill the hole in that wall.
Yeah. Just the sheer stupidity of all that, all that alone made me go, hey, this is going to be one of those times where I like Charlotte better than Kristen in an episode. There you go. Boom.
Yeah. And I really just need Ben at some point just to look at her and be like, what is wrong with you? Why is this here? Like I already had to fix all of your plumbing and you failed to mention that maybe we should repair this.
So speaking of Ben, now that you mention him, so switching over here. Is Ben losing his goddamn mind?
Seems like
Are
he might be.
are now are we going on the idea this is all still supposed to be the work of a jinn, or they kind of seem to be making a, or they, oh, well, are they? Are they implying it's conceivably something hereditary at work here because of what gets brought up about his father, about the whole situation where his father was cheating on his mom for years, and he kind of blamed it on migraines, which, by the way, might be one of the most bizarre reasons I've ever heard of someone
Yeah, I couldn't
as
put
an
that
excuse
together,
to
but
cheat. It's like, so you had a migraine, you had a bad headache, and you went out and you hooked up with. Well, let me just say one thing. If you've got a migraine, i.e., an incredibly painful
you aren't
headache,
gonna go out to
not,
anything.
forget the going out part. There's one thing you can't do.
Yeah.
No, you can't. It's not like
You're not gonna be wooing
it's
the no
difficult.
fair
Like,
ladies
like,
with a migraine baby.
there's an explicit podcast. We can say it's like, sorry, you can't fuck with a migraine. You can't.
Just not something on the list of things you can do.
It's
You
the
can fix a hole in the wall.
it's the reason you don't have sex. It's
Yeah.
because you got a bad headache.
It's
It's not the reason
literally
to have sex.
it's literally the coined excuse,
Because
right? I have a headache.
there's this thing with blood flow, and no, you couldn't do it. So
You just
anyway,
can't.
anyway,
You just can't. That's a
but
silly that's a that and you know, Ben and his sister are practically geniuses. So
well, I'm very curious about this because they seem to be planting at sea because
that maybe
that,
dad had the same
there
kind of
could be
thing.
something else going on here. Are we going to meet Ben's dad next episode? Will it be an actor I know or not? Who cares? I don't care. I can't really think of anyone that would make sense.
Well,
Oh, actually, I know who'd be. I don't want to. No, I know they didn't get that actor, so forget it. He wouldn't stoop to television, but the Ben stuff was just really fascinating because I love how there's a moment in the episode early on when he's having the back and forth with what's her name, Renee. Is it?
Renee. Hmm.
And because it was a thought that occurred to me for a moment there, and here's where I'll credit the writers, because this isn't the hole in the script, like that hole in the wall kind of a thing, where right when I thought it is when Renee actually says it. It's like, wait, do you think I'm gaslighting you? Because there was a moment like, wait, could she be gaslighting him? And we've been thinking it's the
Right?
other thing and we don't really know that until that video.
Yep.
Now, is it possible, because they touch on all the things that are going on the show in the world today with technology and whatever,
Yep.
you can do a deep fake AI create CP whatever thing, and you could pull that off. Now
I feel like there's a really good possibility with that because the girls have been talking so much about AI, and then we get that whole story thing. And even though it was kind of silly, why was it necessary?
I kind of feel like that could be where they're going here, and because maybe sometimes every once in a while you do need a rational explanation for something,
Yeah.
because not everything should be, because it makes sense that if 2/3 of the team are about saying everything is something else.
Mhm.
It can't be every time we watch it, we're like, yeah, but it's always something supernatural. They just haven't wrapped their heads around it. It's just like, oh, we don't know for sure, but we'll
Right.
try to explain it, but we know it's something else. Oh,
Especially Ben, who usually can find the answer of the rational answer, but has been experiencing this battle like with a djinn,
right,
and
right.
and accepting the battle with the djinn, like so much that he just says it out loud to his sister.
I really look Ben. I've really dug the Ben character from the get go, and I
Same.
love how over the course of the last couple seasons, he's definitely moved up from being kind of, the story always felt it was more about David and Kristen, and he was kind of like, the somewhat funny guy in between,
Right, right.
because we all know him from The Daily Show and stuff like that. He's not really a quote unquote dramatic actor or whatever. And how, well, over the course of the last couple seasons, with all the shit that's been haunting and spooking him in his house, from the previous season and now this, it's like, I like that they're really using him in a very interesting way. And that's why I get frustrated when he's in an episode where he's not used that much. Here, I got a healthy dose of Ben. And
Yeah.
the fact that he actually does try to get her to stay, and I
Yeah.
and I think that's partially motivated. Whether it's by fear or whether it's almost as a further way to test the situation and the experiences out. If he's there by himself, it's how do you know? Because I don't see him convincing his sister to hang out there or whatever. I don't know if he has. I don't know if he has genuine
Yeah,
relationshipy feelings towards her. I don't
it's
think he
confusing
does.
towards Renee because I don't feel like we've been given anything that shows that there's like some magnetic chemistry between the two or that he is thinking about her a lot. He doesn't seem to be distracted when the other two are talking that he's thinking about her. Those kind of
Right.
telltale, things that say, "Oh, this person's going to push for a relationship moving forward."
And they're
I was so surprised by the stay.
and they're very deliberate, and because it ratchets up Ben's freaking out and whatever bewilderment by just being told about the things that he's done. That you called me to come over. Oh,
Right.
you told me you wanted me to stay here. Oh, whatever. It's not until the video thing at the end where we actually see experience one of the things that she has claimed, whatever, which still makes it. There's still a possibility of a gaslighting thing here. I don't know if that's where they're going to go. I'm very intrigued to see if they try to find some sort of genetic hereditary thing, whatever, and because they spend a lot of time talking about the dad stuff, and I really think I'm really curious if he's gonna see his father, and then I'm just dying to see how that plays out because I'm wondering if there's gonna be a lot more to this. So I'm super super intrigued by something which may not be a major storyline, but it feels like it's almost got the weight of it now, at this point. I almost put it on the same level as the David stuff at this point.
Oh, yeah, I would
and
too.
I'm a little bit more intrigued by it because while the David stuff is deliberately mysterious because of the clandestine Vatican organizations, blah blah blah, and does
Right.
he have powers, whatever. I kind of feel I know what they're doing there. I just, and with David's ability,
Right.
I don't quite know where there's so many things where the Ben situation can go. And I know the one that I personally will find the most interesting. And I hope it is something which is a family trait situation, haunted kind of a situation. Oh, haunted. Maybe he's being haunted by, oh wait, wrong show again. Never mind. Anyway.
Well,
Oops.
it all does lend to the idea that he's accepting, he's more bewildered that there's this other version of him that's doing things that he doesn't remember doing.
Mhm.
He doesn't seem upset about it. And in fact, he seems to be like, that's the person I want to be.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I keep saying interesting. He says that, and I do believe in the moment he believes that only because the version he's seeing that he's hearing about from Renee, or more that he's seeing in that little silly video, is someone who doesn't seem to have a care in the world.
Yes.
It's someone who doesn't have the burden of what's
Knowledge.
weighing him down, troubling him, making him question that his belief system. Because again, even more so than Kristen, he's supposed to be the science minded one.
Right.
He's supposed to be the one who kind of, he's the one who would even have been skeptical of psychology and therapy up to a certain point.
Yep.
And for him to have that system challenged over the last couple of seasons by the things that seem to encounter him in the shadows of his loft all the time, to what's going on with this now a new creature, this Jinn, which by the way, that shot they did in that earlier episode of it rising behind him is a great shot, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's made him question himself. So when he sees that, it's like, oh, that version of me is happy because I'm not happy. And that's what makes what he says believable. And that's why I think he would, even if it's slightly, I don't want to say selfish, but maybe slightly, but selfish in a understandable way, why he would ask her to stay because, maybe with her there, maybe he can get closer to being that way. But the problem is still going to be you still have a question that needs to be answered. And it's a big fucking question. This isn't like, oh, I'll get to
Sure
that.
is.
I'll deal with that when I deal. Like, no, you got to deal with that now. So I'm looking forward to the next untitled episode. See how they're going to go with that. Bastards. Once again, we had an episode where the quote unquote the case of the week episode didn't really take up that much of the episode. And again, that's because I think of the strength of the actual continuing storylines and how now what they've been doing is taking, whatever the case of the week is, and it kind of ties into it. So the case of was you have an engineer who works a specific train that, has this run from, I forget where they say, I guess it's supposed to be some part of Queens all the way to, I don't know, Long Island or something, Garden City or whatever. And apparently the engineer keeps seeing like this, keeps seeing is being haunted on the tracks at a certain point during the death stretch where people have committed suicide a number of times.
And if I can interrupt really
Yeah,
quickly,
I bet I know what you're going to say.
kudos to that actor too. Well, he's sitting there and he's delivering that monologue to them.
Yeah, I thought he was
That
fantastic.
was so great.
I thought he was in fact, I would even go as far as to say, not that there's ever been anyone who sticks out in my head as being not great or bad,
Right.
when they see a client, but this one was different.
Mhm.
And there was a nice, tired, weary, understated way with how he presented it, and with genuine fear, but not hysterics or anything. I liked how he interacted with them when he was at the church and how he spoke when he was actually on the train with them, and his disappointment and when he realized that they didn't see what he saw, because in that moment, be it due to just being not looking in the right direction, why they wouldn't keep their eyes trained out the window the entire fucking time, I don't know, especially when they're on that certain stretch. This is the part where you're supposed to pay attention. But it's kind of like the resolute frustration he had was really kind of nicely done. So I appreciate you pointing that out, because I did enjoy that. I didn't realize and again, I don't know specifically where they film Evil. They probably, I believe they do shoot in New York, because that was the joke with The Good Wife, where it took place in Chicago, but they shot it, generally speaking, they mostly shot it in New York. And every once in a while I kind of tell. And I think that might have been the case with the Good Fight as well. If I meant to say The Good Wife first, so hopefully I did. Evil actually takes place in New York. It would actually be kind of funny if it turned out they didn't shoot it in New York. I haven't looked.
They shoot in Astoria and in Brooklyn.
Okay, perfect. I think she's supposed to live in Queens. I think, Ben has to live in Brooklyn. That's supposed to be that's got to be a Williamsburg kind of loft kind of thing or something.
Yeah.
It looks like what it's set up to be. So yeah, other than, because I guess I hadn't really thought about it. And this is just, by the way, the only people who are even going to give a fuck about what I say in the next minute are people who are from New York. Everyone else is going to be like, who cares? I had always just thought that was a subway track, an elevated subway track above her, because there are parts of the city, Queens, Brooklyn, etc., not Manhattan, that have elevated tracks. It didn't occur to me that, because that train is not a subway train. That's more of God, did they even say what kind of train it is? I don't know if they did.
Well, it's like a freight. It's definitely not passenger.
Yeah, that didn't appear to be a passenger train. And I guess that does. I mean, I don't know the railroads as well as other people. I actually have a friend who works for the railroad. I should ask him. Maybe I will. So I thought that was curious, and that was why I will admit, I was surprised and delighted at the same time when they have the issue and they stop and he goes to check out the rest of the train. And then David sees that, oh, look, another demon. Which,
Oh, and
which,
oh my
which,
God,
which
I loved that slow walk up where there's just the tiniest little something the show does so well. You got the red light,
mhm.
the tiniest little like side swipe of the profile. I mean, like there's just hardly anything you can see, just enough to know there's something there and shit, it moved.
That's something the show does quite often when it's a reveal to one of the other characters. They've certainly done it with Ben a few times,
Mhm.
whether it be the previous season of the thing that's just in the corner of the shadows, or even with the Jinn where it was just at the very edge of the screen. It's one of those things like you think of those who have like the larger screen television you have and with the sharpest kind of resolution,
Yeah.
probably the more you'll enjoy this. Cause I was like staring like, God, do I have to put on my readers to see what they're seeing here? Cause
Oh,
I'm like Ben.
it was so freaking creepy. And of course, the things lose the creepiness when they come into light, and you know,
Yeah.
and it's still entertaining, you still enjoy it, but the way that they're able to just hammer out that like that corner of your eye fear that startle that everybody gives themselves. What did you just see out of the corner of your eye? And they're able to do that and put it like front row center in your vision, but still give you that corner of your eye reaction. It's just so great.
But the well, it's not really a but the great reveal, and to me, what might actually be, unless I'm forgetting something, and I probably am, in some ways, the best reveal in the episode is when they realize, oh, it just jumped off, and hey, look, we're right above Kristen's house.
Yeah.
And kudos to them. It never even occurred to me that's what they were going to be doing here. It never,
Hmm.
because they never made a mention.
Nope.
And in a way, again, I'm going to have another reason to bash Kristen. Look at that. Oh, two more reasons. Here we go. Number one, when they're talking to the engineer earlier on in the episode and he talks about the train and it's like, I'm surprised you're like, hey, that's the train that runs by my house.
That's where I live.
That not even an acknowledgement of it whatsoever. Okay. And then then she acts like there's nothing going on. Like, no. It literally jumped right here where your house is.
Yep.
Why are you acting like this isn't a big deal? We're telling you this happened. We need to go in. Why won't, oh, I was getting so frustrated. That was the thing that did it for me with her episode. I was like, this just happened.
Yep. Right there.
What? Why? Do you think that there's a cool bodega it really likes that's in the neighborhood?
She'd already had too many of those mini
You think
margaritas.
I was like, wait, which way, sunny side? I don't know. That was so. Oh my god, oh, I'm so stupid. Okay, so as far as the rest of the episode, it's funny. We mentioned like the previous week. I think last week. I think was that the one that was kind of Ben Light, maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
This one, I
Hmm.
think, would maybe be more on the David Light kind of thing. Um, but I, unlike unlike that dancing one, um, this one there was so much good stuff packed throughout the episode. We haven't even mentioned the fact this is a great Sister Andrea
It is
episode.
so, oh my God, with her sitting there and him like the demon sitting in that hole in the wall. And when she's sitting there talking to Christy and we're getting the all that
Uh,
going on. It's
this
so fantastic. You know, him just rolling his eyes and his hatred for every loving notion that she might have is so funny.
Well, when you kick it off, when she tries to determine what kind of demon it is, what it represents, because she's dealt with the demon of grief and the demon of, it's like, and the demon's like, I'm Lou.
Yeah, I love it. Like, what is your name?
I was so annoyed when I tried to, I tried to look up the who played the demon online and they didn't even have it listed. Maybe it is there now, or I'm sure if I did a Google search, I could probably find it. It's like, oh, I wonder if they got another cool actor to do it or maybe without even screen credit or not. But a great Sister Andrea episode because of obviously, first thing first, her dealings with the demon there. But also her interactions with Kristen are really well handled since they're from very different schools of thought. And I love the fact that, and the way they do this episode is of the two, and Kristen's really, and I'll slight credit to Kristen for trying to be rational and even understandable that she wouldn't want these things happening behind her back. She's
Yep.
got a point there. It's not, these are, they're still at an age where if you're interacting with any other adult, whatever they're doing,
Right.
she
You
should
want to
know
know about
about
it.
it, regardless of whether it's something in organized religion or a teacher or a neighbor or whatever. You need to be told. Now the fake permission slip. That's classic. Who hasn't done that?
You bet.
Um, but what was interesting back to between Kristen and Sister Andrea is like, but the fact that Sister Andrea was actually the more calm and rational of the
Hmm.
two, which spoke well for not just her, but even for religion itself, and her promise that she will just she's there to answer questions.
Yep.
She's not there to proselytize or anything else, And I don't think anyone really would have, knowing her character, would have thought she would do that in the first place. But anyway, again, I'm an Andrea Martin. I've said it before. I'm an Andrea Martin fan from way back from SCTV. I did not like her character at all on Only Murders in the Building, but I love, love, love her character here. It's one of the high. The only thing I was sad about, no Wallace Shawn. No, where's my I need my Wallace Shawn, and I need that. I need them just giving him the case. Come on, they just had the case. They weren't given the case. You gotta have the guy giving, you gotta have Charlie telling the angels what the case
Hand
is.
it off,
You gotta
right?
have Peter Graves or whoever it is giving the mission to Mission Impossible. You need anyway. Was there anything else that really stood out? Cause I realized we were kind of running. I mean, it's been one of our better conversing podcasts, but I just realized we're nearing the 2 hour mark, which is a little bit longer than I expected. Okay. I'll just say one thing and then you can not, I mean, oh, you know what? I still love the kids. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I still find them bizarrely believable, and that's kind of what
Oh
makes them
yeah.
work for me. The only other thing, it's a little, another lovely little touch. I love the fact that they played up the whole exorcist motif here, especially with the fog outside, which is clearly, put upon. And when the door opens and Sister Andrea is there, and it's kind of like, oh, they're totally doing the exorcist thing here. It's very funny. It's all, to me, it was like, it's a little over the top. And I realized, you know what? I bet there's a lot of people watching this who haven't even fucking seen the exorcist at this point. But,
That's true. But they do such lovely little nods to things. Anybody who is a fan of the genre can instantly pick up.
absolutely. Absolutely. Oh,
I do want to mention that at the very end though, I do like this season's been really great about giving us these cliffhangers.
yes,
I feel like more than any other season has.
I agree.
But when she brought her little app outside and
Ooh,
you get the one pop-up of an entity found. Okay, that's a little creepy, but then you get the other, and then the boom, 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 and we start seeing all of them. And that little panic, that jolt it gives you, and then boom, that's the end of the episode. I was like, yes, that's so
yeah,
good.
you're
That's
right.
so good.
It's interesting because we've clearly had a few episodes now, or at least two that come directly to mind. It might have been more so, where while there is still a case of the week, it hasn't been playing as major a part in taking over the episode narrative as it has in the past. They're leaning more into the continuing storylines that are going on, kind of like an X-Files-y kind of thing,
Yep.
which is also what the X-Files eventually did as well. They would have their more, standalone episodes that might have a little bit of the continuing storylines. And then you'd have the episodes that really just went right to the continuing storyline. And if there was a case, it was minimal at best, or then, cause I got a feeling there's going to be at least an episode that won't have any case whatsoever, because there'll be too much other shit going on. And we're only we've only have done half a season. We've got another
Right.
7. Ooh, it's so good. Um,
But this season has been given a lot more, like with the cliffhangers, but they've been doing spooky, like they've always done good with spooky, but this season, like some of the listeners might understand what I'm saying. You might. When something is really creepy, you get this sensation, right? You get the goosebump sensation. But then with me, my brother would get this because we share this. It's like something happens and makes your eyes watery. It's like that. You feel this, like it creeps in when something's successfully creepy, and you get the goosebumps and the eye watery thing. And then you get that, like when they were up on the train, and then the demon kind of reveals itself, and then you calm down from that. But to give that to you right at the end of the episode and then just hit it at the end with the credits, there was just something so fucking fun about that.
Right. And the point I was trying to make, and I think I didn't quite make it, but in the past, a lot of the episodes, because there were more about, the episodes tend to be more about the case of the week, standalone elements. If more, I think quite often, if the episode was going to end on a creepy, wacky, whatever note, it was just something relating to the case, whatever.
Yes.
Whereas this is about, it's cliffhangers that are going into the next episode, into the storylines that we've been following all along, which gives them that much more weight than the kind of ending that we've had. Even though I'm sure there were cliffhanger episodes before, but I don't have that kind of photographic like memory like some people do, like certain Survivor fans, whatever.
They've definitely been more impactful this season.
Yeah, it's been good. Alrighty then. Like I said, we are right about hitting the 2-hour mark as I say this, so it's been a good 2 hours for a change. And if you enjoyed these 2 hours of this podcast, maybe you'll enjoy spending 2 minutes on our podcast page on Facebook. The Serious TV Drama Podcast page, I mean. Like the page, join the conversation. There'll be one there eventually about shows like Evil, The Boys, or anything else you want to talk about that's either TV related or movie related, or, I don't know, Scott related, Jamie related, whatever. I don't know. You can follow us on X, Twitter. That's what I call it. Some people are still there. We're STVD Podcast is the handle there. We're on Instagram, which is Serious TV Drama is one word. If you happen to be on sites like, say, Apple Podcasts, because we are available on most, if not all, podcast platforms, or the bulk of them. I think are we on Spotify? I think we are. I don't know.
We are. And if you leave a comment on any of that, you won't be haunted. So
it would be nice. Just, but also you're saving me, 30 seconds of commenting on the next podcast. So it's kind of I do have another podcast, but I haven't gotten around to recording the next one because I've just had so much stuff I'm dealing with in real life that I haven't even been able to nail down a host for the next couple episodes of Scott Forgot the 80s. So eventually I'll get to that for anyone who cares. Some things just take up more time, and this one's taking up time. There will be a podcast coming from me and the fella from Kentucky. I'm like 99% sure we're actually going to have a talk about it tomorrow evening, me and him. That would be the series The Bear.
I'm going to make a prediction, and I'm going to predict that your Kentucky friend is going to say that this season's been wild.
I could see him saying that. I'm not sure what I haven't really clearly thought about what adjectives I'm going to use for this season. I think it's going to be, you know what? It's going to be a mixed bag. And I think that's how I feel about the season. It's a mixed bag. But that'll be coming soon. Again, me and Brian will eventually nail down when we can record a podcast about the bear, because, got other stuff going on, and I have to make sure I make time for the next podcast to do Miss Jamie here, because we will be doing the next podcast covering the next episodes of The Boys and Evil. And as I alluded to earlier, once again, there is no title for the next Evil episode because, they're going to fuck with us again. Seeing how they seem to botch it this week, it's probably not that encouraging. I do know the next episode of The Boys will be titled simply The Insider. Dun, dun, dun. Who the connect me? I don't know. Uh, anyhow, I'm gonna get to the thank yous and closing the curtain now before I get into that 10 minutes of needless rambling, which will add too much time to this. And, other than making God happy, it won't make anyone else happy. Jamie, once again, thank you. Thank you for spending your Saturday night with me. Oh, it's like I'm in high school all over again.
Yeah, you bet. You know my number. You call me whenever.
I never noticed that tattoos on your arm before. Interesting. Cool. Cool. I've got tattoos too. Anyway.
We are part of an elite tattoo club.
That's right. Anyhow, thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed this one, and we look forward to talking to you guys. Well, no, we don't talk to you. Well, I fucked up the ending of the podcast. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening. See you then. Bye-bye.
We're going to Branson, baby.
Yeah, going to Branson.